No, because I turned the thing over to you. Uh-oh. Say disconnect.
Share again.
Share screen. Looks like it should be on the screen here. Hold on a second. Yeah. Come on. Doing the full screen for this now. No, I don't think that's it. It has some, the Zoom thing is like minimize the screen here. Anybody? Any Zoom experts here? Yeah.
What happened?
Well, it minimized it, so now all I have is this little screen.
It's the yellow band.
Problem is, I don't know where
Can
he's
you
at.
go hover on that and then on that and click on that. Yeah. And then we can open it, like just make it more open.
Well, I don't know how we're gonna make that bigger.
Can I?
Yeah.
Sure.
Go back up to the top with a drop down bar. Sharing.
We don't have that on the screen. That's the problem. We don't have it there.
It was just on the screen.
So I think the problem is, hold on. No. Where is your display?
Never fails. Here, the video is watching. That's a different one.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
That's what it is.
crazy.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so just do the stop share on there. The new share.
Okay, so then we can try. Okay, so now, but that's go down the bottom.
I know, but I gotta get the mouse.
There's one.
I'm gonna close off that. There it is. Okay.
I know. Click on it. Yeah, do that. Yeah, that's what happened. Now we're talking.
Hold on.
We've got so much stuff there.
Right.
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
How many people does it take to fix Zoom?
But Craig, you have it recorded.
All right. After further ado, right, I'm Michael Kolb. I'm going to talk a little bit about excavations on the Auraria campus that we just literally concluded on Friday. So this is basically hot off the presses. My colleague Gene Wheaton, who's now on board, is here. We also have a couple of students who were involved in the excavations. We have Monica Eccles from CUD, and we have Jeff Zapp from MSU. So we've been involved in this program basically since the beginning of the semester. So I guess we started at the end of August. And we've had, of course, a number of important community partners. Not only is CUD partnering with Metro, right, to work on campus, which of course is where both campuses are located. We work very closely with AHEC, right, which is the Auraria Higher Education Center, center. Right? And then, of course, we have a number of community partners, which includes the Auraria Historical Advocacy Council, which is basically the displaced Aurarians, people who are in Auraria when campus basically, or the state used eminent domain to claim campus and then booted out everybody that was in the area. And we also have worked with our Cheyenne and Navajo tribal partners as well. So we work with a variety of people to get this project going. Like I say, this is pretty much hot off the presses. I don't have any nice quantitative data yet because we're still sort of doing all that. For just most of you hopefully are aware of Auraria itself, right? It's considered to be one of the oldest portions, right, of Denver. It was really called West Denver, right, in Denver City. It was basically settled in the 1850s by basically miners who came out of Georgia, a gentleman named Russell. However, the area, of course, predates. It was used by a variety of Native American tribes because, of course, its strategic location, where you've got the confluence of Cherry Creek with the South Platte River, and where the campus is, particularly the 9th Street Historical Park. It's a very ideal area. You're up high. You have a really good panoramic view of the confluence for any sort of hunting. So it was a very frequented area for camping, particularly by the Arapaho. And then, of course, by 1858, 1859, you can see the image there of from the Hunt collection, which shows settlers right on one side, and the rear side we have the Russell settlers row of houses here, and then of course you've got Native American settlement on the other side. And of course, because of this, right, because of Cherry Creek, it's been known, right, to flood both, as you probably are all aware, right, both the river as well as Cherry Creek have flooded multiple times, which was something I think many of the Native American or Arapaho were telling the local settlers not to settle there because it's just a really bad place. And so it's got a very, very rich history going back, stretching back into the earlier formative period of Denver itself. It also has a more recent history, of course, becoming West Denver. It became a very important working class neighborhood. We've got a number of images right from Denver Public Library that gives you a general sense of what it was like. It was a very important area. It was a multi-ethnic neighborhood where you've got Eastern Europeans, you've got Latin Americans, you've got a variety of people who were coming in and residing that began to supplant or replace many of the original Euro-American settlers that settled there as they were basically uprooting themselves, moving to Cherry Creek and other neighborhoods, right? This became a working class neighborhood. So much so, right, that the state decided when it was time, right, to build what they wanted to build was an urban campus. They decided the area was the best place to basically condemn, right? And they used a variety of justifications, primarily the flooding, which you'll see probably didn't happen, at least in a good chunk of the Auraria campus itself. But that was the justification, that it was just really not a good place to be living. So it was a deal for a campus to be built. You can see here, this is from the 40s, right? Just to show you, this is 9th Street, if you're familiar with the historical park. This is literally just between, right, just in front of south of St. Cajetan's here. You can see here, this is when they were doing all the destruction for the Auraria campus, where they leveled, they went through and they leveled a good majority of the buildings here. This is actually from 10th Street, like looking across to St. Cajetan's to 9th Street here. So this was, I think, is an open park pretty much right here. And then you would have what we call a north classroom, one of the classrooms that was placed right there. This is the historical park today. So they did, of course, preserve one section of 9th Street, basically a city block and a half or so with historical houses. The Golden Meyer house was placed there, and a number of other houses are original. But you can go there, and many of you probably have gone there and walked this area. We, of course, have, I don't know how many students are on campus now. It was up to, what, 100,000 a few, 5, 8 years ago. I don't know if there's that many there. But most of the students, of course, really have no idea about the history of the campus itself. And they go and they look at the buildings and go, oh yeah, there's some really cool, historical buildings, and that's about all they know. They don't realize, right, the political history of Auraria itself. And of course, this is something that the displaced Aurarians is a basically group descendants of people who lived in the Auraria campus. They are still really, really eager to bring this history to light and to basically document their legacy. And this is really how this project sort of began as the, do something wrong. There we go, okay. Was the brainchild of Gene, right, to begin to excavate. Actually, the Auraria campus has a sort of a long history of excavations. It's been spotty excavation history dating back to the 80s. John Cantor's worked right on campus. Your predecessors worked on campus. There's been some contract archaeology. It's all very spotty and really not really coalesced. Moreover, unfortunately, AHEC is non-state compliant, so they really don't comply with state laws very much. Much of their work they just kind of just do. You read all these reports, they just dig up and they say, hey, we found a bunch of bottles, that sort of thing. So unfortunately, they're not even, as a state entity, it's kind of amazing. They're not even compliant to state law, so which is a bit of an issue. Anyway, we began our project, of course, primarily, right, we have research objectives, but more importantly, was really to work with the displaced Aurarians and to build a sort of a momentum, right, to bring their legacy to light. And excavations really are a great way to do that. So we were able to get some good press. We actually had a ceremonial blessing in August when we began. We had some of our Native American partners and the Aurarians came in. We had a nice day there where we were able to basically try to put our excavations in the context of what's going on, right, in both in the past and the future. Now, Gene was able to do, I believe it's 2019, right? It's 2019.
Actually,
2017. Gene was able to go through, right, 9th Street, and you can see here, we've got 9th Street running here, and we would have considered to be sort of the south and west side here, as well as the north side, the Mercantile building here, Golden Meyer house is there, or actually it's up here, and then we've got the Smedley house, which is located here, which is, Smedley was the very first dentist, right, located in Denver, right, and set up the dental school here. Gene went through, we did a series of what we call ground penetrated radar, dragging Dr. Conyers from DU to come out and do the project here, and identified a variety of features on both sides of the street, back behind the houses, right, which would be located near the alleyways of these blocks. And much of of course, the back ends of both of these blocks have been destroyed. And so identified a variety of features. They're all labeled here on this side, A through F, and then 1 through 7 on the other side. And so all these represent like promising areas of excavation. And we ended up excavating these 2 features this past fall, E and feature E and feature F there. Now, We've also begun the historical research to try to understand who resided here and when. And of course, it's very convoluted because, of course, it used to be what Cheyenne Street, and then it was renamed 9th, and they had a numbering system in the 300s, and they changed it to the thousands. And then even when they changed it to the thousands in 1888, 9 is when they changed it, you've got a variety of street addresses, right? And so we know it's somewhere between 1038 and 1044 or so. And so we're not exactly sure which it is. It was probably varied through time. So we do know, however, the tax assessor's lot, it's block 64, lot 4. So at least we can identify through the tax assessor records. But again, we're going through the historical documents, and there's actually, you can see here, this is 1049th Street, where we've got the Leidens mentioned there in the 1800s. And then in another document, we've got it as listed as 1044 with the Leidens located there. It's spelled, sometimes it's Leiden, sometimes it's Leiden, depending upon which document you're looking at. This is the actual lot here. This is the lot 4. There would have been maybe probably 2 houses located here. We think this is not the house that we excavated, but the one adjacent to it. This was maybe taken, we think maybe late 60s or early 70s, where there was a large print shop that was located where we were excavating. All right, I'll just try to make some sense for you right looking through historical documents. This is from the 1889 atlas, which is very similar to the Sanborn maps, if you remember the Sanborn maps, that show the lot itself. This is a 1040 lot. It's actually broken up into 3 different parcels, what they consider to be the north and then the south, and then or the north and then actually the north 25 foot, the south 25 foot, and then the south 16 foot. That's the way they make reference to it in the tax assessor's office. And these, of course, switch hands. So originally, perhaps it was a simple 1 lot or maybe 2, and then it gets parceled at some other point. This is, like I say, the 1889 atlas map shows you relative features, right, where we ended up excavating. This is an aerial photo of the King aerials from 1933, which is basically overlaid. Once again, you could probably see, right, this long bungalow-style house, right, for which we actually were able to dig right up adjacent to it. And then there's this kind of vacant 16-foot wide lot that goes all the way back where we had a GPR location of features. So we were able to do both of those. This is an aerial from 1963, the last known photograph or aerial image of the house here. You can see here, we think that the photo that I showed you is this other house here, 1044. And then you can see the back of the house here. And this house actually, as well as this building, this outback building, was destroyed between 63 and 64. And there was a large print shop that was located there as well. It was placed over that area. And to add the final context to show you what the historical park looks like today. This is from 2004, a Sanborn map, aerial photos company. And you can see now it's basically a vacant lot. And this was, you can see the original houses, and then the houses here were destroyed because of their dilapidated condition. And one of the hopes that we have together with the displaced Aurarians is to make this a memorial park. That they tie into some of the excavation materials that we've discovered, particularly some of the brick, and maybe make it into some memorials. So, in addition to bringing to light some of the legacy of Auraria, one of the other key goals was student training. We had 3 different classes that were involved, as well as a couple of additional students from various places, particularly Monica from CUD. Jean taught an introductory archaeology class. We had about 8 or 9 students. And then I taught a field study program, both at the 2000 and the lower division, the upper division levels. So we had a mishmash of about 20 some students of all various backgrounds and expertise levels. So it was very interesting, it was very enjoyable, it was very energetic, and it was very promising, because it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of of fun. This is when we began our excavations here, right? Located, this is actually feature E itself here. We were able to get some protective fencing so we could continue. And we dug literally every Friday throughout the semester. Literally, like I said, finishing up this past Friday. We backfilled. Literally 20 centimeters below the surface, we started to find architectural ruins. We were able to find what appears to, you can see some of the stonework here, which is actually the back end of that 1038/1040/1044 house, whichever one that is. And you can see here is we've got the comparative sort of drain tile or sewage line that we've got here, also made of ceramic here. And then actually, I'll show you as we go forward. I'll show you a better picture of that. And then that was feature E. This is feature F, which is in the back lot of the house, probably near the alleyway, which we thought was basically a dirt floor, is what the GPR told us. But it turned out actually we were able to, we actually found a cistern, a line cistern. Once again, literally 27 meters or so, so not very far off. Actually, this was more like 30. And again, all of these, both of these locations, right, are ideal for student training. So we were able to train them on excavation techniques, screening, mapping, drawing, all those kinds of things, and of course, gathering recording, which is very, very good. So they got the full gamut of excavation experience. This is this is actually some aerial shots just to give you a sense of feature F, which is the back end of this house. I could show you that in a little more detail, but these are two various stages you can see here. This was in sometime, I think about maybe October the 21st or so. And this was, I think, November the 11th. So Armistice Day. So we were able to find a variety of architectural walls. The house would have gone off this way. I'll show you that in more detail. This would be your plan view, or the final plan view. And then what you have here is a variety of things. So you've got what is considered to be the original walls of the house here. And we think this house dates to the turn of the century, about 1903, when the lines, we think, built when Anna Lyde and wife remodeled the house. Although we do have houses in this property that earlier, so it could have been an earlier structure before this as well. But the actual architectural wall is here, and then actually goes here to here. So we're at the back end of the house, and there is exactly 137 meter entryway here. It's a cellar entrance, much like a cellar storm door. So there was a back door. You've seen those storm doors, right, like in Wizard of Oz, right, or some of the old historical houses that they could open up. And we actually had some inserts in the brick for wooden steps that would have been here. So this would have been a cellar door entrance. So the cellar doors, we've gone into a number of the houses around there. They're what, about 6 to 8 feet, right, in sort of depth or so. We were able to dig to about 5 foot, but then we OSHA, right, we would not be OSHA compliant. So we sort of stopped and did stop there. There's exterior, this is all exterior space. There's a little garden wall of 1 course high of loose set stone bricks. These are actually mason bricks at all, so they're not dry laid. This would be dry laid stone. It probably was like some sort of big garden wall or something along those lines. This is the drain tile, the ceramic drain tile that we assume would probably date to the 1880s or so. And then, like I say, the cellar entrance and the cellar proper. Shows you, we did some photogrammetry just to give you an idea, right, of the site itself and the relative depth. So we really only dug to what, about 4.5 feet, 5 feet or so, right in the house itself. We have a variety of artifacts, right, and we're still in the process of doing the analysis. We have at least 1,000, more like 1,200 artifacts that we collected. We're still in the process. I mean, they're still literally in the field bags, and we've been trying to get them entered and then processed as we go. That's hopefully a project for this coming spring. But all the trappings, all the artifacts that you normally expect to find in a house that is bulldozed in 63, 64 perhaps, and then stretching back to the turn of the century or maybe even before. We've got all kinds of variety of medicine bottles. This is a medicine bottle from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. that held balsam oil. We've got a clay marble that would date again to the 1800s. We've got a shell button, just to give you an example, and a variety of other materials, lots of ceramics, lots of glass, and similar to what Amy talked about, the Astor House, lots of bone, lots of cut bone, a variety of chicken and pig, cow, right, that was located mostly actually just outside the house. A lot of it was out, some of it was in the house as well, but a lot of it was placed out in the garden where they probably spread everything out. We also found artifacts as late as the 60s. We found a thermos bottle, right, like we take to work from the 1960s. We found bits of Cracker Jack toys, you know, those little reflective toys that you find. So a variety of materials that we found from, like we say, literally from the 60s all the way back into the late 1800s. So in terms of change or architectural change or stratigraphic change, there wasn't a whole lot other than the foundation of the house. However, we do have some retrofitting that was going on in the house. There is a galvanized steel pipe, if maybe you can see that right there, that was retrofitted into the house at some point below the frost line. So either represents a water line or potentially a gas line that was retrofitted sometime after the house was constructed. So they pounded out this hole somewhere in the foundation. They probably dug a trench right as they were laying the line that was there. Concomitant to that, and you can see above it, this is the sewer line itself as it came into the corner of the house. So it would have drained right to a toilet or a sink or perhaps both on the wooden floor, the first floor above the actual basement. And you can see here, this is ceramic pipe. However, there's a metal insert here. This is actually iron insert that once again was retrofitted into the house. So you can see here, they had smashed up the bricks here at some point to retrofit the steel pipe, right, that actually went into the house. So maybe perhaps it was originally ceramic and retrofitted, hard to say. However, there was a break here, and this break was old. Actually, it was covered over with a coffee can lid that was bent and then cemented over. So it could have been maybe when they retrofitted this, it was literally just 5 or 6 inches below the ground surface. It's really shallow. So it could have been at some point they were digging and someone smashed the drain tile and they repaired it with coffee can and cement. And the cement that covers it actually is very similar to the cement that was used. And actually, maybe the diameters here are very, very different. This is much larger. It's about 1.5 inches wider than the actual iron insert. So again, it appears to be retrofitted, but again, we're not sure exactly when, as we're trying to figure that out. Now, in feature F, which is located back towards the alley, we found this cistern as well. We found evidence of what appears to be a dirt floor. There was also an addition of asphalt floor that was fairly superficial and then busted up. This could have been the original floor from some outbuilding. If it turned a carriage house turned into a garage, or maybe from a print shop, that they had some sort of asphalt, but it literally ends right here. So they didn't damage the well whatsoever. And the well, of course, is pretty much intact. And we were able to actually excavate the well actually quite nicely. They spent a lot of time on that because it was very tight quarters and sort of excavation, right? You can fit one person in there at a time. This gives you an idea, right, of the plan view of the feature itself. So we really had our asphalt, floor, which again, well, destroyed, I got that wrong. It's probably 63, not 73 there. We have the actual cistern, and then the bricks of the cistern were very similar perhaps to the bricks in the house. We think they're locally produced. They're not stamped. They're not glazed. They're probably not best made. And we believe, right, if I'm not correct, Gene, that they're probably manufactured in Auraria.
Yeah, probably with Paul.
Auraria is. There was a brick factory there. So, and they were localized bricks, so they're not stamped. Many of the later houses, by the way, you see bricks that are imported from the East Coast, a lot of New York brick that are glazed and stamped. But these predate those. So we've got basically what we think is this later asphalt paint. This is actually would be facing towards 9th Street where there was this print shop. We've got a dirt floor pavement that we think basically dates to the cistern because of course it's undisturbed. And we've got a series of concrete footings that seem, again, not to be more recent concrete, but probably turn of the century concrete as well. So we think that perhaps there was a structure, and if you go back to the aerials, it would seem to have been in 33, a structure that was over this, right, or right adjacent to the cistern itself. And the cistern itself, we think, again, dates again to the 19th century. We found quite a bit of materials, much of it actually very good stratigraphic context. Materials, right, that were probably used once the cistern stopped being used. So it was filled probably when water lines were introduced to the house, right, in probably the neighborhood, that they no longer needed the cistern. The cistern would have been ideal for water that could be used for the carriage house, for the horse, maybe for the house. We also think maybe the cistern could have served more than one house because it was on a piece of property that was never built on. It was a nice little walkway, almost like an easement to 9th Street, so it could have been other people coming to use that cistern as well. However, when it was filled in, we found all kinds of a variety of materials that were very well preserved. As you can see, there's another medicine bottle in its entirety. There's a little thimble, another soda bottle here from the 1800s. And we've got a variety of ceramic pieces that date from England, right, in the late 1800s. So we have a variety of materials. And at the very bottom, we found actually quite a lot of material. This is the profile that we've reconstructed so far, just to give you a general sense. So we've got actually a very nice series of stratigraphic layering with the majority of the material probably right here, placed right probably when it was abandoned. Most of the artifacts that we found in this lower area, right, date to 1816 or before, right? So most of the things are fairly early. And we've got a series actually of what we think are wood fragments. We think they're remnants either of the lid to the cistern that would have been placed on the top, or perhaps the roof of a neighboring building or a building, but all kinds of wood that we've collected here. It's actually wood slats. It looks like oak, but I don't know. A series of slats. And then actually there was a couple bricks that were actually mortared into the floor. So there's one course of ceramic bricks. They were mortared on the inside to retain water, and then they were mortared on the bottom with no bricks underneath, again, to retain the water. It was about 5 centimeters of mortar on the bottom. But in the dead center of the cistern itself, they placed 2 bricks and mortar up and over, serving probably as a pedestal, maybe for a wooden post that would help the roof up, maybe a wooden post to help serve as a bucket that would have gone in and out of the water, something along those lines, but it would have served as a pedestal. And it was mortared right up and over the bricks itself. We've got what we think are a series of burn layers. There's a burn layer here with lots of trash, particularly bone, and another layer right in here that's bone. So at some point, right, we think maybe they did the initial fill, perhaps where the limits of the intact plaster, this coincides with the intact plaster. Above that plaster, it's all broken away, and maybe because it was exposed to the air, it would have decomposed faster. And then they slowly filled this up. We've got some of the most recent artifacts are from the 1940s to the 50s, right near the top. We actually have an oral informant who basically remembers seeing this maybe in the 60s, Gene, he would have been a young boy in the 60s, remember seeing this world. So we also have, we've had a geomorphologist or a microstratigraphy person come out and take a look at this. There's a couple high energy depositions, much like Amy was talking about in the back of the Astor House. We think that it's limited, right? We talked a little bit about flooding in the area. And we did a series of cores and excavations throughout. There's no evidence whatsoever of flooding in this portion of 9th Street. So even though the state used that as a reason to condemn a piece of property, there's no evidence. Excuse me. However, we do have 2 high energy, I think, water deposition levels there. And we are hypothesizing that it had to do with just local flooding In 1912, there was a serious rain flood, Jericho flooded, and there was a neighboring canal, it was actually a canal that connected to Cherry Creek that brought water to this area that could have overflowed. It wouldn't have resulted in flooding of the entire neighborhood, but it could have resulted in flooding of a depression, right, that would have been where the cistern was located. So we've got at least 2 high energy layers, right, of flooding here and here, and we're doing sort of a microstratigraphy on that. The well itself is about 5 foot, right? It's actually 53 inches across, 63 inches down. And we calculate that out to be about 725 gallons of water, which we think, right, is tied to the water carts, right? One of the big issues with Denver was, of course, if this was a cistern and not a well, it's well above a good 40 to 50 or 60 feet above the water table, that this would have served as a cistern. And of course, they would have had to have water delivered. And since the 1880s, right up until the 1920s, water was delivered by horse cart. There was a number of companies that eventually were consolidated all into Denver water, right, shortly after. So we think that obviously one of these carts we think held, we're not 100% sure, we're going to go out to the Douglas County Repository where they've got a water cart there and measure it so we get a sense. But we're hopefully assuming that it's going to be about 725 gallons, just enough to fill the cistern. So in addition to some of the research, right, our future goals, right, of course, are to continue, right, working on some of the material analysis and the stratigraphic analysis of both features. And of course, this also brings into hopefully some of the context of Auraria, right, that can be used in the future for dissemination, not only to the displaced Aurarians, but hopefully to campus as a whole. One of the goals that Gene has been working especially hard on is building a museum on campus that would house some of the materials, because we've got a lot of them in the Metro Lab, and PAAC has got file collections here and there all over. It would be nice to consolidate them and get them placed right into a display space that students, right, will then learn a little bit more about the legacy of their campus. Okay, thank you.
I'm curious about the microstratigraphy you're talking about. And I was wondering, you mentioned that there were a couple of layers with high energy. Can you talk a little bit about the criteria that one uses to determine energy differences?
Well, I'm not a microstratigraphic expert. We've called one in. It's a former Metro student who runs a petrography company, right? She does lots of soil work for oil companies and so on. But it's basically small, well, one of them is very small particles. It's all sand. It's very sandy deposition, very little clay. We've got clay depositions in other areas. This is all sand. And the other one is actually very gravelly. So it would be very high intensity. The sand, maybe not so much. She thought it was, I thought maybe it would be very slow water that would just sit in there, right? But then again, maybe not, because it's all sand. So that's a good question. This is something that I can tell you more over time.
I'm just curious.
But what we are doing now at home, I've got all these samples of soil that I'm putting resin in every day, 200, 300